Hello everyone, welcome yet again to another one-shot video lecture. My name is Ashwin Joglekar and I am from Resonance PCCP division. Today we are here with the topic Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution, that is from your class 9th history portion. Now let us quickly begin and understand what this chapter has to talk about. Alright, in the first part of the chapter, that is probably for a better understanding of the chapter, we can divide this chapter into two parts. Alright, that is the first part we can take सोशलिज्म इन यूरोप, इसको हम पहला पार्ट कर सकते हैं और उसके बाद हम सेकेंड पार्ट में देख सकते हैं द रशियन रेवोल्यूशन. तो अगर इसको आप दो पार्ट में डिवाइड करके समझेंगे तो ज्यादा बेटर भी होगा. अब सबसे पहले हम सोशलिज्म एज एन आइडियोलॉजी कैसे ग्रो करा और उस टाइम क्या कंडीशंस थी यूरोप में, वो पहले पार्ट में देखेंगे एंड फिर वो रशियन रेवोल्यूशन, दैट इज द ब्लडी संडे एंड later on the February Revolution, the October Revolution and collectivization and other things. Alright, अब सबसे पहले age of social change. Now see, people were thinking about a change in how society was being structured. तो तीन तरह के लोग थे, that is liberals, radicals and conservatives. ये तीन तरह के लोग थे जो डिमांड कर रहे थे कि सोसाइटी में किस तरह के बदलाव वो देखना चाहते हैं या what kind of changes they were looking forward. That is after the revolution, which revolution? That is the French Revolution actually was a turning point in Europe. Individual rights and social power began to be discussed in many parts of the world including Europe and Asia. Colonial development reshaped ideas of societal change, but everyone was not in favor of the complete transformation of society. Okay, they wanted a gradual transformation, but no one was actually willing for a complete transformation. Like liberals wanted some small changes, radicals wanted a complete change, whereas conservatives wanted whatever is the past, that is how it has to be respected and we have to live accordingly. So through the revolution in Russia, socialism again also became one of the most important ideologies, most significant and powerful ideas to shape society in 20th century. Alright. Now liberals, radicals and conservatives, that is what here with. Okay, as we can see, liberals the first one, radicals and conservatives. Now liberals were the people who wanted a nation which tolerated all religions. They opposed uncontrolled power of the dynastic rulers and argued for a representative elected parliamentary government and which is subjected to certain kind of laws and interpreted by a well-trained judiciary that was again independent of rulers and officials. They wanted a government again based on the majority of country's population as well as a constitution in place. Conservatives after the 19th century accepted changes but also believed that the past had to be respected or needed to be respected and change should begin slowly. The most significant among them were the radicals. Alright, the radicals thought that there should be a complete transformation within the society. That was their idea. Alright. Now, later on, industrial society and social change. What was the kind of industrial society, how it developed? See, as we know, industrialization started from UK and slowly it moved to other parts of Europe. So therefore, as industries were going, industrialization and urbanization was going hand in hand. That is, as industries were being set up in cities, these cities were gradually or started gradually became expanding themselves. So industrial revolution led to changes in social and economic life of the people, new cities which came up and new industrialized regions developed. Men, women from other regions, that is, came to the factories and as well as children came to factories to work in search of work. But unfortunately, working hours were very long. Wages were very poor, that is the condition of the worker was or the laborer was bad. Working hours as it was supposed to be 8 to 10 hours, but it dragged down to 10 to 15 hours or 16 hours. Wages were very poor because there is again number of jobs is less and the people who want those jobs are more. There was unemployment during the time of low demand for industrial goods. Liberals and radicals, because they themselves had made their wealth by setting up these industries, were looking for solutions for these growing cities. made up wealth through trade or industrial ventures. According to them, society can be developed if the freedom is provided to them of individuals is given, was ensured, and if the poor could labor and the people who have money can easily invest, so automatically the societies will grow. That is, and those with the capital here is money, could operate without restraint, without any government restraint here. That is, again, obligations of the government or restraints which are imposed by the government. In France, Italy and Germany and Russia, revolutionaries again overthrow existing monarchies or monarchs. Nationalists, they were talking about revolutions to create a society where everyone will have equal rights. We'll just have a look at this part again. That is, in France, Italy and Germany and Russia, revolutionaries overthrew existing monarchies or monarchs. Nationalists were talking about revolutions to create nations with equal rights. Now, coming of socialism to Europe. Now, as per aspect of socialism, how this idea evolved. Now, as we can see, there are a few names which have been mentioned here. That is Robert Owen, if you can see here, and Louis Blanc, Karl Marx, again the most important person, and Friedrich Engels. All right. Now, socialism was a well-known body of ideas by the mid-19th century in Europe. Socialists were against the idea of private property. They were against the idea of private property and considered it to be the root, as the root of all social ills of the time. तो जो भी ill है, उसकी जड़ क्या है? Private property. They wanted it to change it and campaigned for it. Now, Robert Owen, who sought to build a cooperative community that everyone owns everything, community called New Indiana or New Harmony, in Indiana, USA. Louis Blanc again said that it is not possible if there is no government intervention. So, he wanted the government to create such cooperative, encourage cooperatives and replace capitalist enterprises. Later on, Karl Marx and his friend Friedrich Engels added other ideas to this body of arguments. According to Marx, industrial society was by its very nature capitalist in nature. That is, all the amount of capital which is invested was capitalist who owned the capital invested in factories. That is, whatever the factory is, the capital which is being employed in that is owned by the capitalist people. Now, they want the whole share of the profit to again be with them, and the profit of the capitalist was produced by workers. That is what his idea here differed from the going norm. The capital which was employed by the industrialists in the factories, that is, they owned their capital, but the profit which the company or the factory was producing was actually earned or made by the workers who were working there in the factories, but the profit was all kept by the capitalist owners. Now, he wanted that this should be shared equally among people, which was again not possible. That is, capitalism and the rule of private property were overthrown or should be overthrown, and the workers should take over the ownership. Marx believed that a communist society was the natural society of the future or for the future. That is what his belief was. Sorry. Now, support for socialism also grew, but even apart from that, socialism could not form a complete government on its own in Europe. It was the first time it formed came as a complete ruling power in Europe was in Russia. Now, support for socialism, by end of the 1870s, socialist ideas were spreading throughout Europe, and they formed an international body, namely the Second International, to promote their ideas. Associations were formed by workers in Germany and England to fight for better living and working conditions. The Labour Party and Socialist Party, were formed by socialists and trade unionists by 1905 in different parts. The Russian Revolution, that we will be looking at next point. Now, both the events, that is, in the October Revolution of 1917, socialists took over the government in Russia. The fall of monarchy in February 1917 and the events of October were termed together as the Russian Revolution. Now, that we will be looking at now. Okay, he was the Tsar Nicholas II, the ruler of Russia. 1894, Nicholas II, he belonged to the Romanov dynasty of the kings, became the Tsar, announces the principle of autocracy will be maintained by me as firmly and unswervingly as by my lamented father. So, he was again believed in the divine rights of kings. The Russian Empire in 1914. In 1914, Russia was ruled by Tsar Nicholas II and its empire. The Russian Empire at that time was a huge one, and which included the current day countries of Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, parts of Poland, Ukraine and Belarus, stretching to the Pacific, and comprise today's Central Asian states as well as Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan. Majority of the population was Russian Orthodox Christianity, but others who were even included Muslims and Buddhists as well. Now, how was the economy and society in Russia at that time? Economy and society, that is, at the beginning of the 20th century, Russian population was dominated by agriculturists. That is, most of the people, a number of people who were working as agriculturists were more, who used to cultivate for the market as well as for their own needs. St. Petersburg and Moscow were the two prominent industrial areas in Russia at that time. Craftsmen generally undertook much of the production work, but large factories existed alongside craft workshops. In 1890s, more and more factories were set up after foreign investment was again pouring in industry increased. Large factories were supervised by the government to ensure minimum wages and limited hours of work. But again, this was not followed strictly. Workers were divided social group, that is, they were divided in terms of in which industry a worker is working, and apart from that, from how a worker had the ties with their respective villages. They were again divided by the skills. Despite divisions, workers united to stop work when they disagreed with employers about certain things, about dismissals or work conditions. Peasants again cultivated most of the land, but the nobility, the crown and the Orthodox Church owned large properties. That is again same, it was similar in Europe, that is, most of the land was which was being cultivated was by the peasants, but the land in fact was owned by the nobility, church and the king. The nobles got power and position from their service to the Tsar or their loyalty to the Tsar. So, in fact, they were not very popular among the peasants, the nobles. In Russia, the peasants wanted the land of the nobles to be taken away and given to them. Sorry. Now, socialism in Europe. Now, political parties in Russia were illegal. Sorry, this should be illegal. Illegal before 1914. In 1898, socialists, they founded a society, secret society, that is the Russian Social Democratic Workers Party, who respected Marx's ideas of Karl Marx. Some Russian socialists also felt that the Russian peasants' custom of dividing land periodically made them more natural socialists. Marx believed that the revolution will be coming from the workers' side in the factories, but many of the people in Russia believed that because Russian peasants also equally divide their land periodically and cultivate together, so therefore they are also natural socialists. So probably the revolution may come from the side of peasants. Throughout the 19th century, socialists were active in the countrysides and formed the Socialist Revolutionary Party in 1900. The party struggled for peasants' rights and demanded that land belonging to nobles be transferred to the peasants. The party again later on was divided on the strategy of organization, that is, according to Vladimir Lenin, who was the leader of the Bolshevik group, he wanted that people who are really into the cause of socialism should be made the members of the party, and it should not be open for all, as in Germany. So, Lenin, in a repressive society like Tsarist Russia, the party should be disciplined and should control the number of and quality, that is, the number and quality should be controlled of its members. Only those who have a desire to be socialist and they are even ready to give their life for it, Mensheviks were the minority group, thought that the party should be open to all people like in Germany. All right. Now this is some of the differences between as you can see, Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. This meant a member of the majority, this meant a member of minority, believed in highly centralized party of professional revolutionaries, believed in a more democratic party structure that allowed as well as disagreements also. Not willing to work with middle class for their revolutionary aims, willing to work with middle classes for their revolutionary ends. Drew less public attention than Mensheviks, drew more public support because of their inclusive ideas. They scorned other ideologies, that is, they did not like other ideologies, they were inclusive in their approach of other ideologies. 6th point, they believed that Russia could directly go from absolute monarchy to communist society. They believed in going ahead step by step to make a country communist. So that is what the differences between the two major leading groups, Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Now, turbulent time during the 1905 revolution, that is also termed as the Bloody Sunday, and the events after that. So, Russia was an autocracy, and even at the beginning of the 20th century, the Tsar was not subject to a parliament. Now, during the revolution of 1905, Russia, along with social democrats and the socialist revolutionaries, worked with peasants and workers to demand a constitution. For Russian workers, bad times started from the year 1904, as prices of essential goods rose and they were not able to purchase, and their real wages actually declined by 20%. So, prices are rising and their real wages are declining. So, the food is again becoming more and more expensive and out of their reach. Now, workers went on strike demanding a reduction in the working day to 8 hours, an increase in wages and improvement in working conditions. So, probably the 3 points you can say is increase in wages, reduction in working hours, and lastly the point is better working conditions. Better working conditions. So, these were the 3 points which were raised by the workers there. Now, this it was led by Father Gapon, and it was a peaceful procession which was going on again to meet the Tsar and request or give them their complaint in the Winter Palace. This procession was attacked by the police and the Cossacks when it reached the Winter Palace. Now, incident which is known as Bloody Sunday, because it was happened on a Sunday and many of the innocent people were actually killed during this and many of them wounded, started a series of events which resulted in the 1905 revolution. Now, even the Tsar became afraid of it and he accepted that, okay, I will agree to the formation of a Duma, that is known as also in Russia the parliament is known as Duma. So, during the 1905 revolution, the Tsar allowed the creation of an elected consultative parliament or Duma. Elected consultative parliament or Duma. After 1905, most communities or committees and unions worked unofficially since they were declared illegal. Now, but again, the story behind this is that is even after this he agreed for the establishment of Duma. The first Duma he dismissed, then the second re-elected Duma again he dismissed, and the third which was re-elected was again packed with the conservative politicians or the people who will support him, and liberals and radicals were kept out of that Duma. Now, as the world approached towards First World War, as we know, First World War was from 1914 to 1918. Each country thought that they are better than the other and they will crush the other country within days of the war, and their territories in Europe as well as their colonies worldwide will become theirs, and they will again increase their resources. But this war lasted for 4 years, and let us see how Russia participated in the war, and then in between they left the war. That is the First World War and the Russian Empire. In 1914, war broke out between two European alliances, that is Germany, Austria and Turkey, that is they were known as Central Axis powers or Central Powers on one side, and France, Britain and Russia, and later Italy and USA or Romania also joined, and they were the Allied powers. This was the First World War. The war became popular as it continued. The Tsar refused to consult. Earlier, initially the war was popular and even the people supported the Tsar, that is the Russian population supported the Tsar, Russian soldiers, army supported the Tsar, and initially when there were victories, their morale was high, and as soon as they started experiencing defeat, they lost their morale, and at this time the Tsar also stopped consulting anyone regarding the strategies involved in war. So, gradually people lost their will to fight the war. That is, the war became popular earlier as it continued. The Tsar refused to consult the main parties in the Duma. Support wore thin, that is grew less. The First World War was different on the this should be eastern front and on the western front. Between 1914 and 1916, Russian army lost badly in Germany and Austria. Russian army destroyed crops and buildings to prevent the enemy from taking that over, being able to live off the land. The country was cut off from other suppliers of industrial goods by German control of the Baltic Sea. Now, railway lines again began to break down by 1916. For the people in cities, bread and flour became scarce because everything was being sent to fight the war or for the soldiers. So, by winter of 1916, riots at bread shops were very common, and this again became the reason for them to move out of the war and the February Revolution. All right. Okay. So, the February Revolution in Petrograd. Petrograd city is divided among its people. On the right bank of the river Neva, the worker quarters were there and factories were located, and on the left bank were located the government fashionable areas, Winter Palace and the official buildings. Food shortages deeply affected the workers' quarter, that is on the right hand side, and on the right bank a factory was shut down on February 22nd, and this is the time when women led the way to strikes, and therefore this is also again known as International Women's Day. That is, we celebrate International Women's Day on 8th of March, right? And because the Russians used to have a different calendar at that time, so therefore this event happened on February 22nd. The government imposed a curfew as the fashionable quarters and official buildings were surrounded by the workers who came out in protest, and here again the women are leading the protest. Duma was suspended, closed down on 25th February. The streets thronged with demonstrators raising slogans about bread, wages and better hours and democracy. So, bread, wages, better hours and democracy were the things which were raised by the people. Bread, wages, better hours and democracy. The government called out the cavalry in support, but they refused to fire upon the demonstrators, and later on by evening the soldiers and the striking workers came together and gathered to form what is known as Soviet or Council. Soviet or Council was formed in the same building where the Duma used to meet, and it termed as the Petrograd Soviet. Now, they called themselves as the Petrograd Soviet. Soviet leaders and Duma leaders formed a provisional government to run the country. Russia's future would be decided by a constituent assembly elected by on the basis of universal adult franchise. Petrograd had led the February Revolution that brought down the monarchy in February 1917. So, that is how the government, or that is the people, took over, and finally monarchy was abolished, and the people, that is the ministers or army officials close to Tsar, advised him to abdicate. He abdicated, that is stepped down, and finally Petrograd had led the February Revolution that brought down the monarchy in February 1917. So, this was one of the first events which happened in February 1917 in Russia, and later on we will be moving on what events happened in between February and October Revolution. Alright. So, next part talks about after February. Under the provisional government, army officials, now see here, army, all the rich people are in control of power. Army official, landowners and industrialists were influential. That is, they had the control or hold over power. Liberals and socialists worked towards an elected government. Restrictions on public meetings and associations were removed. Now, associations could be formed and public meetings could be held. In April 17, Lenin also, that is the Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin, also returned to Russia from his exile. He came back and he gave his famous April thesis. That is, three things. First, war to be brought to an end, the First World War, that Russia should move out of the war. Land has to be transferred to the peasants, and all the banks have to be nationalized. So, this was his April thesis, 3 points. He also emphasized on renaming the Bolshevik party to the Communist Party, symbolizing its revolutionary aims or its structure. Workers' movement spread throughout the summer to different parts. Factory committees were formed and trade unions grew in numbers. When the provisional government saw its power decline, now what happened was the provisional government was seeing that they are in power and still people are turning, or people are forming trade unions, and because these people, industrialists, could not see that, because they were part of the ruling government, and in front of their own eyes they are seeing that the workers of their own factories are now trying to run their own their factories. So this they could probably not digest that fact. So therefore the provisional government was seeing here that their influence over the people is declining and the Bolshevik influence among the people is increasing. Now this made them more worried, and therefore they started using oppressive measures like what the Tsar used to do. Similar measures they also started using on the people. This made people drift more away, more from provisional government towards the Bolsheviks. That is, when provisional government saw its power reduce and Bolshevik influence grew, they decided to take stern or strict measures against the spreading discontent among the people. In the countryside also, the peasants and their socialist revolutionary leaders pressed for a redistribution of land among the peasants. Encouraged by socialist revolutionaries, peasants seized land between July and September 1970 of the nobles. Sorry. Then comes the revolution of October 1970. Now in this, what happened was, because the provisional government was trying to turn a dictator, that is what Lenin, when he called a meeting and he formed a military revolutionary committee whose in charge was Leon Trotsky. Now they felt that the provisional government, if it's not being checked, or if there's if they do not take over power right now, or if there's no socialist seizure of power as of now, what will happen is this provisional government might turn into a dictatorship and might arrest all the leaders. So therefore they thought that it's the best time to take over power by force. So the conflict between the provisional government and the Bolsheviks grew. On 16th October 1917, Lenin persuaded the Petrograd Soviet and the Bolshevik party members or Bolshevik to agree to a socialist seizure of power, that is to take over power. To organize the seizure, a military revolutionary committee was appointed by the Soviet under Leon Trotsky. The military revolutionary committee ordered its supporters to seize government offices and arrest ministers. By nightfall, the city was under the committee's control and the ministers had surrendered. So at a meeting of the All-Russian Congress of Soviets in Petrograd, the majority people approved the Bolshevik action, that is the socialist seizure of power. And that is how the October Revolution happened. Now what changed after October? Again, to keep things in control, even Lenin turned to a dictator and took stern or strict measures to keep things in check. So what changed after October? Industry and banks were nationalized in November 1917, which meant that government took over the ownership and management of these banks as well as industries. Land was declared a social property and peasants were allowed to seize the land of the nobility. The Bolshevik party was renamed the Russian Communist Party and that became the only party. Elections were conducted in November 1917 to the Constituent Assembly, but they failed in majority, that is they could not bring a majority. But in January 1918, the assembly rejected again the Bolsheviks' measures, and Vladimir Lenin dismissed the assembly, saying that the Soviet is more than the assembly. Despite opposition, in March 1918, the Bolsheviks made peace with Germany at Brest-Litovsk, and the Bolsheviks participated in the elections to the All-Russian Congress of Soviets, which became the parliament of the country. Russia became a one-party state, and after October 1917, this led to experiments in the arts and architecture as well. Now, many people, intellectual classes now became, or intellectual people now became disillusioned with the complete idea of socialism, that is the workers' government or worker being in charge and all those things. But many became disillusioned because of the censorship the party had encouraged to keep things in check. Now, the civil war which happened, that is between three groups: Reds, Greens and Whites. Reds were the communists or the Bolsheviks, Greens were the socialist revolutionaries, and Whites were the pro-Tsars, which thought that they will still can come to power, and were supported by even US and Japan, because they did not want Russia to become a communist, because communist ideology was in direct confrontation or just opposite to the ideology of capitalism. The Russian army broke up and their leaders moved to South Russia and organized troops to fight the Bolsheviks, the Reds. During 1918 and 1919, the Russian Empire was controlled by the Greens, that is socialist revolutionaries, as well as the Whites, that is the pro-Tsarist, has most of the Russian Empire under their control. Now, they were backed by the French, American, British and Japanese troops. These troops and the Bolsheviks fought a civil war. By January 1920, the Bolsheviks controlled most of the former Russian Empire. Now, tables had turned or changed, and in the name of defending socialism, Bolshevik colonists brutally massacred local nationalists and other leaders. Most non-Russian nationalities were also given some kind of political autonomy in the Soviet Union, erstwhile Soviet Union, USSR, that is Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the state the Bolsheviks created from the Russian Empire in December of 1922. Now, making a socialist society, how socialism was seen as an idea, and how a socialist society had to be developed. Now, during this the civil war, industries and banks again were being nationalized. Peasants were permitted to cultivate the land. Centralized planning was put forward. Process was introduced. Officials worked on how the economy will work and set targets for a 5-year period, and this is what even we have taken from Russia, that is the 5-year plans. Now, during the first two plans, the government fixed all prices to promote industrial growth, that is prices of commodities were fixed. Centralized planning led to economic growth, but rapid construction led to poor working conditions, because see, Russia, that was again a wonder for many people, that such a poor state in such a poor condition became such a huge superpower after the Second World War. Schooling system developed and arrangements were made for factory workers to educate and peasants to enter universities as well. For women workers, creches were established in factories for the children. Cheap public health care was provided. Model living houses or quarters were set up for the workers. So, facilities were given, but maybe those facilities lacked actually the quality in that. Alright. Next, Stalinism and collectivization. Now, after Lenin, Joseph Stalin took over as the party leader. The period of the early planned economy led to some of the disasters of the collectivization of agriculture. Now, the period of early planned economy again later on showed some of the disasters, that is collectivization program which was introduced by Stalin. By 1927 to 1928, the towns in Soviet Russia were facing a huge problem, acute, of grain supplies. Now, richer peasants or farmers were hoarding the supplies or blocking them from entering the market, so that they could sell it when the prices are Good. Stalin had to introduce firm emergency measures at this time to control this. In 1928, party members toured the grain producing areas, supervising and enforced grain collections and raiding kulaks. Kulaks were the name of the well-to-do peasants. After 1917, land had been given over to peasants, and from 1929, the party forced all peasants to work collectively, or that is to cultivate in collective farms which are known as kolkhoz. Peasants worked on the land and the kolkhoz profit was shared among the peasants. Between 29 and 31, the number of cattle fell by 1/3 and the government of Stalin allowed some independent cultivation, but again they were treated very badly. But treated such people, cultivators, unsympathetically. In spite of collectivization, production did not happen much or increase immediately, and due to bad harvest of 1930 and 33, over 4 million people actually died. Throughout the country, accusations were made against Stalin and his policies, but again those people were packed off and were never seen again. By 1939, over 2 million were in prisons or labor camps in various parts in Russia. The global influence of the Russian Revolution and the USSR. Now, in many countries, communist parties were formed. Even in India, Communist Party of India was formed, like the Communist Party of Great Britain. Non-Russians from outside the USSR again participated in Conference of the People of the East in 1920. The Bolsheviks, which founded Comintern, an international union of pro-Bolshevik socialist parties. Before the outbreak of the Second World War, the USSR, erstwhile Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, had given socialism a global face and a world stature. The USSR had become a great power and its industries and agriculture had developed and the poor were being fed. By the end of the 20th century, the international reputation of the USSR as a socialist country had declined, and finally in 1991 socialism in Russia, that is USSR, disintegrated itself, and the successor state which is left is Russia now after 1991. And again that is a series of events which happened first by the falling of the Berlin Wall in 1989, which later on led to the disintegration of the Soviet Union. He is Joseph Stalin, who took control of the Communist Party in Russia and the first 5-year plan to industrialize and collectivize the agriculture of Russia. Now, we can just go through this, a small mind map kind of a thing of the chapter for a quick revision. That is, you can see here, Tsar Nicholas rules over Russian Empire with absolute power. Russia suffered humiliating defeats in a war against Japan at that time, which led to protests and calls for reform. 1905 led to Bloody Sunday. Nicholas II agreed to allow a Duma or a legislature for the people. 1914, Russia takes part in the First World War, entered World War I and quickly suffered heavy losses in major defeats to Germany along the Eastern Front. Then March 1917, revolts in Petrograd forced the Tsar to abdicate and a provisional republic was established. November 1917, Lenin and Bolsheviks take control of Petrograd and overthrow the republic. 1918-1921, Bolsheviks, the Reds, fight with and win a civil war against the Greens and the Whites, against the White Army. Lenin established the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics under the control of the Communist Party, and finally in 1929, Stalin became the sole ruler of the USSR and created a totalitarian state. So this is about the Russian Revolution in a one short video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.